Under cover of World War I, Turkey officially declared that the Armenians had to be moved out of danger. That basically means that the Armenians had to be deported. Now, on a paper, officially, the Armenians were promised housing in Syria, and on paper, their property was seized and distributed to the Turks. And it was understood that once the war was over, the Armenians would return to their houses in Turkey, and their property would be returned to them, and everything would be okay. On the contrary, meanwhile, in reality, the Armenians were disarmed, first of all, and all able-bodied men were drafted into the army and sent to labor battalions. Now, on a side note, these men who were sent to the labor battalions did not stand a chance at all. They were taken aside in small groups and executed without trial or whatnot, just to kill them. Now, what all this meant, there were no weapons and no men to defend the villages. So this way, the Ottomans made sure that another Zeytun could not possibly happen. That means all of these villages were ripe for the picking, you could say. Well, I'm just going to go through a couple points here. The people who physically carried out the genocide itself, that group was known as the Special Organization. It was formed in secret by the upper echelons of the Ottoman government, and it consisted mainly of ex-convicts, as well as some other people, I think. But these people specialized in rape and murder, and they were just the kinds of people who were specializing, you could say, in what was called for. Now, it should be noted that during this time there was no foreign intervention. The Ottomans expelled the foreign inspectors general, and the only people who were left that weren't foreigners were essentially the missionaries who were left behind. Now, one more point here. In a memorandum sent from Talat Bey to Enver Pasha, this is very important. Talat Bey says, "The work must be done now. After the war, it will be too late." It was understood that the Armenian Genocide had to take place within World War I, because after that, they would not have a chance. Before that, they could not do it because there was so much foreign pressure on them, or so many eyes focused on the Ottoman Empire, that such a thing could not possibly happen. It was very difficult. But now that you could say they had an excuse to deport the Armenians, and they could do something on paper, say that they were in the way, now they could deport them and march them through Syria until they died or whatnot. Another point, there was a lot of perceived disloyalty among the non-Muslims at this time period, and it's partly because of propaganda and all this stuff. Thank you, Vicky. That's my computer talking. There was a lot of perceived disloyalty among the non-Muslims, but it should be noted that during the wars, during World War I, actually, with the Russo-Turkish border line, Enver Pasha led an ultimately failed offensive into Russia. But the Russians counterattacked, and they killed tens of thousands of Ottomans, and it was under the cover of the Armenian soldiers in this time period, in this little area, that took Enver to the side and saved him. They disobeyed orders, went out of their way, and escorted Enver out of the war zone, and otherwise, as Enver Pasha states, written down, that if that hadn't happened, he would have been a Russian prisoner. So much for perceived disloyalty among the non-Muslims. The Armenians did not want their own country. They wanted to remain Ottoman citizens, and this helps prove that. And it should also be noted that during this time, after World War I, there was no punishment for the Ottomans. This is the first time that crimes against humanity actually, was officially recognized, and they did not have the Hague to convict the Ottomans. So it was all very fresh and new. And also after World War One, there were a lot of other things to focus on, such as rebuilding Europe and whatnot. So eventually, the punishment for the Armenians kind of drifted off into the annals of history and was never touched on again. Here we have a map of the deportation routes and the massacres that happened during World War One, the Armenian Genocide. I wanted to point out a few places to you. On the east side of the Mediterranean Sea, we have an area of greater or lesser Armenian resistance um, called Musada. That's Musa Mountain, in other words. There was a very, very famous book, perhaps the most famous book ever written on the Armenian Genocide, about that armed resistance there, called The 40 Days of Musada, and it's by Franz Werfel. And we also have several places up here. We've got Van, that's where Ararat took place. We have Marash and Adana and several other places. I just wanted you to get an idea of the deportation routes and what exactly happened here in Turkey during World War One.